The millionaire lost everything. Only the maid had the courage to give ice cream to his daughter. The afternoon heat was unbearable. The air shimmered, the pavement burning beneath the weight of the sun. Ethan Carter bent down, his trembling hands searching through empty pockets. Dust, scraps of paper, nothing more. Not a single coin. He lifted his head. Sunlight struck his eyes so hard he had to squint. Across the street, the glass window of a bakery gleamed. Golden loaves lined up behind it, their sweet smell drifting through the air, cruelly inviting. Beside him sat Lily, his 6-year-old daughter, knees pulled close, her tangled hair clinging to her face. The little flowered dress she loved had turned gray with dust. She looked up at him, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Ethan swallowed. His throat felt dry as sand. He bent down, forcing a smile. "I know, sweetheart. I'll find something." But even as the words left his lips, he knew they were a lie. His mind was blank. No plans, no hope. Not long ago, he had been someone else. A young businessman running a small tech company, full of ideas and ambition. He once believed he had everything: success, respect, and a bright future for his daughter. Then his closest friend, his accountant, drained every dollar from the company and vanished overseas. It all collapsed in weeks. The bank seized his apartment, his accounts were frozen, his reputation destroyed. Friends stopped answering calls. All that remained was Lily and the hunger that followed them everywhere. For a while they lived in his old car, until even that broke down. Then the streets became their only shelter. Every day since had been a battle between pride and survival. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing. One pointed his phone at them. "Hey, look, the failed CEO, from suits to rags. Guess life moves fast." Laughter echoed. Ethan turned away, face burning. Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, what are they saying?" "Nothing, honey, don't listen." He pulled her closer, holding her small hand tightly. She leaned against him, eyes half closed from exhaustion. The scent of fresh bread wafted through the air again, stronger this time. Lily lifted her head, staring through the glass. "Daddy, can we buy one loaf?" Ethan froze. Such a simple question, yet it pierced him like a blade. He smiled faintly. "Not today, sweetheart. When Daddy finds a job, we'll buy a big one, okay?" Lily nodded, lips pressed tight. Tears rolled silently down her dusty cheeks. Ethan lowered his eyes to his worn-out shoes. The soles were thin as paper. Around them, life moved on, cars passing, people chatting, doors opening and closing. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone but him. He once believed hard work could fix anything. Now the world only answered him with silence. The sun began to set, turning the city gold. Lily looked up, eyes glimmering in the fading light. "Daddy, will we ever have a home again?" He hesitated for a long moment, then nodded. "We will, sweetheart. One day." He said it, though he didn't believe it. But Lily smiled, believing him anyway. She took his hand, her tiny fingers clinging to his. Together they walked down the crowded street, two small shadows swallowed by the evening light, unaware that somewhere nearby, one simple act of kindness was about to change everything. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the bakery windows, mixing with the smell of roasted coffee and warm bread. The hum of the dough mixer filled the air. Grace Miller, 28, small-framed with tired eyes, was scrubbing the tiled floor, her hands raw from soap and bleach. She'd just finished a 12-hour night shift, and this was her second extra job that week. When the clock hit 8, she asked for a short break to grab something to eat, a cold sandwich and a cup of water. But as she stepped outside, she froze. Across the street, under the shade of a lamppost, sat the same man she had noticed yesterday. His head bowed low, his shoulders slumped. Beside him, a little girl slept, her head resting on his lap, her bare feet curled against the pavement. The tiny floral dress she wore was faded and gray. Grace's gaze softened. She recognized them immediately. Something inside her ached, an ache she didn't quite understand. She looked down at the crumpled $15 bill in her hand. It was all she had until payday. Enough for a few groceries, maybe to keep the lights on. But when she saw the child shift in her sleep, a small hand reaching instinctively for her father's arm, Grace didn't think twice. She turned back into the bakery, grabbed 2 loaves of fresh bread and a couple of ice creams. "Take it from my pay," she said quickly, before hurrying across the street. "Hi there," she said gently. The man lifted his head, his face pale, eyes wary. "We're not begging," he murmured, voice hoarse. "I know," Grace replied softly, holding out the bread. "And I don't have much to give. I just thought, maybe you could use this." He hesitated, but the little girl had woken. Her eyes lit up at the sight of the bread. "Daddy! Bread!" Ethan looked at her, then at Grace, guilt flickering across his face. Thank you, but I don't know when I can pay you back." Grace shook her head. "You don't need to. It's just bread." She sat down beside them and handed the ice creams to Lily. The girl giggled, the cold sweetness melting on her lips. That sound, light, innocent, made something warm bloom in Grace's chest. "She hasn't laughed like that in days," Ethan said quietly. "Thank you." Grace smiled, resting her chin on her knees. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Lily," the girl answered before her father could. "What's yours?" "Grace." "Miss Grace, this ice cream is the best." "Then eat another bite for me," Grace laughed, the sound surprising even herself. When the food was gone, Lily curled up again, drifting back to sleep against her father's arm. Grace stood, brushing off her hands. "I'll be back here tomorrow morning. If you're still around, I'll bring lunch." Ethan looked up, startled. "You don't have to." "I know," she said softly, "but I want to. Not everyone gets the chance to help at the right moment." She smiled before turning away, her small frame disappearing around the corner, the scent of bread lingering behind her. Ethan watched her go, his fingers tightening around Lily's hand. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than hunger and shame. A tiny spark of warmth, fragile but real. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Lily whispered, "Daddy, do you think Miss Grace will come back?" Ethan nodded. "I think she will. She's kind." "I like her," Lily murmured, resting her head on his shoulder. Ethan looked up at the darkening sky, wind brushing through his daughter's hair. "Yeah," he whispered, "me too." That evening, after Grace walked away, Ethan sat still for a long time, eyes fixed on the corner where she had disappeared. He didn't understand why a stranger would care for 2 people who had nothing left to offer. So when she returned the next morning, smiling with a small bag of food in her hands, he could hardly believe she meant her promise. "I told you I'd come back," Grace said, her eyes kind. Lily squealed, "Miss Grace, the fairy's here," and threw her arms around her. Their laughter echoed through the street, bright and alive. From that day on, Grace became part of their mornings. Every sunrise, she'd bring food, fresh bread, milk, maybe an apple or 2. She told Lily stories about the bakery, about stray cats that lived behind the trash bins, and Lily replied with tales of castles and magic. Her laughter turned the dusty sidewalk into something almost beautiful. Ethan would watch them quietly, his heart heavy and full. Gratitude mixed with guilt. Grace worked harder than anyone he knew, long hours, sore hands, yet she still found room to give. How could someone with so little still offer so much, he wondered. One morning, when Grace arrived, they found a woman waiting nearby. She wore a gray jacket and carried a thick folder. "Mr. Ethan Carter?" she asked. Ethan stood wary. "Yes." "I'm Mrs. Anderson from the Department of Social Services. We've received reports that you and your daughter are living on the street." Ethan felt his stomach drop. I'm looking for work. Things will get better soon." "I understand," she said gently, "but this situation isn't safe for a child. You have 10 days to find stable housing. Otherwise, we'll have to place Lily in temporary care." Lily's small hand tightened around Grace's. "Care? What's that mean, Daddy?" Ethan knelt, forcing calm into his voice. "Nothing bad, sweetheart. It's just temporary." But his insides were hollow. 10 days. 10 days to find a home, a job, a future. Impossible. After Mrs. Anderson left, silence filled the air. Ethan sank onto the curb, burying his face in his hands. Grace watched him, heart twisting. "What will you do?" "I don't know," he whispered. "I've lost everything. They'll take her from me. I know they will." Lily threw her arms around his neck, crying. "I don't want to go. I want to stay with you and Miss Grace." Grace bit her lip, thinking hard. Then she took a breath. "Come stay with me." Ethan looked up sharply. "What?" "My place is small, behind the bakery. Just one room, but it's clean and safe. It's not much, but it's something." "I can't accept that," he said. "You've already done too much." "Ethan," she interrupted gently but firmly, "this isn't about you. It's about Lily. She doesn't deserve to be afraid anymore." Lily tugged at Grace's sleeve. "Really, Miss Grace? We can live with you?" Grace smiled, touching her cheek. "Of course, sweetheart." Ethan hesitated, torn between pride and desperation. Finally, he exhaled. "If you're sure, we'll only stay until I get back on my feet." "You'll stay as long as you need," Grace said softly. "Now come on, let's go home." Her apartment was a single-room flat behind the bakery, tiny, old, but filled with light. A narrow bed, a small stove, a single window looking out to the alley. Compared to the sidewalk, it felt like heaven. Lily ran around, eyes shining. "Miss Grace, this is my castle." Grace laughed. "Then that makes you the princess of this castle." Ethan stood in the doorway, silent. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," Grace said, setting a pot on the stove. "We're just doing what's right." That night, the three of them sat around the little table, sharing bread, soup, and juice. Lily chattered happily, crumbs on her cheeks. Ethan watched her and then looked at Grace, a mix of awe and disbelief in his eyes. He hadn't felt this kind of peace in months. After dinner, Lily fell asleep in the chair. Ethan covered her with a thin blanket, then turned to Grace. "Why are you doing this for us?" Grace smiled faintly. "Because I know what it's like to have no one to lean on, and because when I saw you two, I just couldn't walk away." The moonlight slipped through the window, painting soft silver on the walls. Ethan looked at his sleeping daughter, then at Grace, and something stirred inside him. A quiet, fragile feeling he hadn't known in a long time. It felt like finding home again. The first days in Grace's small apartment passed like a quiet, gentle dream. In the mornings, the smell of freshly baked bread drifted in from the bakery out front. Lily woke early, humming by the window as sunlight poured through the thin curtain. Ethan still wasn't used to having a real roof, a warm bed, someone boiling water for him each morning. He was starting over from nothing, but for the first time in months, he wasn't afraid to wake up. Each day, he put on his old pressed shirt and went job hunting. He handed out resumes everywhere, repair shops, warehouses, small offices, but all he ever got was polite rejection. "We need someone with a clean record. We can't risk hiring someone who's filed bankruptcy." Every word cut into his pride, slow and deep. In the evenings, he came home quiet and exhausted, sitting in the corner, avoiding Grace's eyes. But Grace never asked, "Did you find anything?" She just set a warm cup of tea in front of him and said softly, "Try again tomorrow, okay?" And somehow those simple words pulled him back from the edge. One night after another rejection, Ethan sat staring at the floor. Grace joined him, voice barely above a whisper. "You know," she said, "failure doesn't happen when everything falls apart. It happens when you stop trying." He looked at her, shadows flickering across his tired face. "Sometimes I feel like I'm worth nothing anymore, just a burden. To you, to Lily." Grace shook her head, her eyes steady. "You haven't failed, Ethan. You're just resting. Everyone falls down. The brave ones get back up." Her words stayed with him. The next morning, he rose before dawn. Instead of staying in the city, he went farther, to the industrial district on the edge of town. There, he applied for a job as an administrative assistant at a transport company. Nothing glamorous, but something that needed someone who knew paperwork and computers. The manager frowned at his resume. "You used to own a company?" "Yes," Ethan said, "and I lost it all. But I'm ready to start again, from the bottom." The man paused, then nodded slowly. "We'll give you a chance. It's not much pay, but if you do well, it's steady." Ethan stood there, stunned. For the first time in months, his heart raced, not from fear, but from hope. That afternoon, when he stepped into the small apartment, Grace was showing Lily how to bake cookies. They were covered in flour, laughing. "You're home," Grace said without looking up. "Grace," he began, voice trembling. "I got the job." She turned, eyes wide. "Are you serious?" He nodded, smiling. "They hired me, a transport company outside town." Lily jumped up and down, cheering. "Daddy's got a job. We're rich now." Ethan laughed, pulling her close. "Not rich yet, but we're okay." That night they celebrated. Grace bought a small roasted chicken and a tiny vanilla cake. The three of them sat around the table, bathed in the golden light of a single lamp. Lily sang between bites, Grace smiled, and Ethan watched them, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep, Ethan cleared the dishes and turned to Grace. "I don't know how to say this, but you saved us, Grace." She met his gaze, smiling softly. "I didn't save you, Ethan. I just reminded you who you are. The rest, you did yourself." Ethan looked down, but in his eyes, for the first time in a long time, burned something bright and steady. The light of hope. Autumn came, the sky clearer, the air softer. Life in the small apartment found its steady rhythm. Each morning, Ethan left early for work, stepping out just as the first sunlight spilled across the street. Grace stayed behind, preparing breakfast for Lily before walking her to school. The little girl carried a faded backpack that bounced with every step. Grace still worked long hours at the bakery, cleaning, assisting in the kitchen, and in her spare time, she practiced making pastries. Evenings were filled with laughter. The three of them sat around the small table, sharing food, stories, and warmth. One night, the light bulb flickered. Ethan climbed onto a chair to fix it, while Grace held it steady below. Lily looked up, anxious. "Be careful, Daddy," Ethan grinned. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Your dad used to fix computers, remember?" When the light came back on, the room burst into cheers. "See?" Ethan smiled. "Light always comes back if you're patient enough." Grace looked at him then, smiling, not because of the light, but because of the man beneath it. Their days were simple, but full. On weekends, they cooked together, Grace teaching Lily to crack eggs, Ethan brewing coffee, the aroma of bread filling the tiny room. They ate together, laughing, sharing the best bites like it was a royal feast. One late night, when Lily was asleep, the room glowed under a single warm lamp. Ethan sat at the table sorting papers, Grace folding laundry. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by the soft wind outside and the gentle rhythm of Lily's breathing. Ethan looked up at her. She wore an old t-shirt, hair tied loosely, yet to him she had never looked more beautiful. "Grace?" he said softly. She turned, smiling. "What is it? Do you ever feel like this is what a real family feels like?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I think maybe it is." He rose and walked closer. "Thank you for giving me that feeling. I used to have a house, but I never felt like I belonged anywhere. Now, I do?" Grace lowered her gaze, heart pounding. "Ethan!" He took her hand gently, warmth spreading between them. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you there, with me and Lily." She looked into his eyes, seeing not pity, not gratitude, but a quiet, honest love. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she smiled. "I want that too." In that moment, they leaned closer. Their lips met, softly, tenderly, and for a breathless instant, the world stood still. No fear, no sorrow, only peace and warmth. The next morning, Lily woke early, sitting by the table, drawing with her crayons. When Grace came over, the little girl proudly held up her picture. 3 smiling figures, hand in hand. "Daddy, me, and Mommy Grace." Ethan looked at the drawing, then at Grace, laughter in his eyes. "So, we're a family now, huh?" Grace smiled, eyes glistening. "Yes," Ethan whispered. "Our family." The months that followed were peaceful. Ethan worked, Grace baked, and Lily went to school with her small backpack bouncing behind her. Their little home was filled with laughter and the smell of bread. Ethan began to believe, truly believe, that the storms of his life had passed. He didn't know another was already forming, far darker than before. One cold evening he found an envelope in the mailbox, thick, stamped with the court seal. He tore it open and froze. Petition for custody. Filed by Vanessa Hall. Vanessa. The name hit him like a punch. He hadn't heard it in 4 years, not since she'd walked out, leaving a 2-year-old Lily and a note that read, "I don't want to be tied down. Take care of her if you want." Now she was back. Ethan's eyes widened as he reached the section that turned his blood cold. Lily Carter is the sole heir to her late grandmother's estate, valued at $3 million. The legal guardian of said minor shall control the assets until she reaches 18. $3 million, he whispered. It all made sense. She wasn't back for love. She was back for money. Grace found him pale and shaking. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He handed her the letter. She read it, her hands trembling. "She's suing you for custody?" Ethan sank into a chair. "She'll win, Grace. She has money, lawyers, connections. And I—" He broke off, voice cracking. "I have nothing." The days that followed were hell. Vanessa's legal team moved fast. Private investigators, reporters, online smear campaigns. Old photos of Ethan homeless on the street resurfaced with cruel headlines. "Failed father lives with daughter in poverty." The story spread like fire. At work, whispers followed him. One morning, his manager called him in. "Ethan, you're a good man, but this, publicity, it's bad for the company. I'm sorry." He was placed on unpaid leave pending investigation. That night, he came home silent, gripping the letter in his hands. Grace saw his face and understood without a word. She knelt beside him. "You're not alone, Ethan. We'll find a way." He gave a hollow laugh. "What way?" "She's rich, powerful, untouchable. I'm just a man who lost everything." Grace said nothing more. That night, when he finally fell asleep, she opened a small box from the shelf, a silver ring, her grandmother's keepsake, the only thing of value she owned. She stared at it for a long time, then quietly closed her hand around it and left. 2 days later, she returned with a woman in a modest suit. "Ethan," she said softly, "this is Ava Price. She's a lawyer." Ava reached out a hand. "I've reviewed your case. If we can prove Lily's stable here and that Vanessa's motives are financial, we have a chance. But we need to act fast. She's already filed for a temporary custody order." Ethan looked at Grace. "How did you—" Grace smiled faintly. "I sold something old to protect something new." But their efforts weren't fast enough. One evening, as Grace was setting the table, a hard knock sounded at the door. 2 officers and a court bailiff stood outside, standard procedure when enforcing a family court order. The man's voice was flat. "By temporary court order, custody of minor Lily Carter is to be transferred immediately to her biological mother, Vanessa Hall." Grace's face drained of color. "No, please, this must be a mistake." Ethan stepped forward, desperate. "You can't. She doesn't care about Lily. She just wants the money." "I'm sorry, sir. The order's final." "The order's—" Lily ran out, eyes wide. "Daddy, what's happening?" Ethan knelt, gathering her into his arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. They just want you to stay somewhere else for a little while." "I don't want to go. I want to stay with you and Mommy Grace," she cried, clutching his neck. The officers hesitated, then gently pried her away. Her screams filled the hallway. Ethan dropped to his knees, reaching out as the door closed. Silence fell. Grace fell beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan's voice broke. "I promised her I'd never let anyone take her away. And I lied." Grace wrapped her arms around him. "We'll get her back, Ethan, no matter what it takes." Outside, rain began to fall. The sound blended with their quiet sobs. And in that stormy night, though their world had crumbled again, somewhere deep inside, a fragile ember of hope still burned, the kind that survives because it must. At first, Lily thought the big mansion might be wonderful. It had marble floors, chandeliers, and a room filled with new toys. But soon she realized it was the loneliest place she'd ever been. Vanessa Hall was always on her phone, at parties, or posing for her social media. Each morning she dressed Lily in fancy clothes and stood her in front of a camera. "Smile, sweetheart," Vanessa would say in a syrupy voice. "Everyone needs to see how perfect our life is." But once the recording stopped, her tone turned sharp. "Don't touch my makeup. Go to your room." Dinner was always cold. Lily ate alone in the massive kitchen, her spoon clinking against the plate. She missed her father's laughter, Grace's warm bread, and the tiny window of their small apartment. Every night she whispered to herself, "Daddy will come. He promised." The only person who cared about her there was Mrs. Lopez, the elderly housekeeper. She had seen everything, the shouting, the neglect, the moments when Lily was locked in her room for the smallest mistake. One evening, Mrs. Lopez overheard Vanessa talking on the phone, her voice echoing down the hall. $3 million. Once the guardianship papers are signed, the money's mine. The kid? I don't care, as long as the account opens. Mrs. Lopez froze. Her hands trembled as she quietly took out her phone and hit record. Over the next few days, she captured everything. Vanessa screaming, throwing things, and Lily sobbing in corners. One night, when Lily was asleep, Mrs. Lopez tucked her in and whispered, "Sleep, my dear. It'll be over soon." The little girl mumbled in her dreams, "I just want to go home." That was the moment Mrs. Lopez knew she couldn't stay silent. The next morning, she requested leave to visit family. Instead, she took a bus across town, searching until she found the small apartment where Ethan and Grace lived. When the door opened, Ethan stood there, thinner, tired, but his eyes lit up the moment he heard his daughter's name. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, her voice shaking. "I work for Mrs. Hall. I have something you need to see." She handed him a small USB drive. "I recorded everything, and the files are time-stamped. The phone metadata will prove it's real." Ethan took it, speechless. Grace stood beside him, barely breathing. When they played the video, Vanessa's voice filled the room. "I just need the $3 million. The kid means nothing." No one spoke. Ethan's hands shook, tears dripping onto his lap. Grace covered her mouth, trembling. Mrs. Lopez wiped her eyes quietly. Finally, Ethan whispered, "You saved my daughter." "No," the old woman said gently. "I just did what anyone should have done." That night, they brought the USB to Ava Price. The young lawyer watched every clip, her jaw tightening. "This," she said firmly, "is undeniable evidence. If we present it right, this ends tomorrow." Ethan looked at her, anxious. "Will it be enough?" "It will," Ava replied. "It has to be." All through the night, the small apartment glowed with light. Ava worked tirelessly, papers spread across the table. Grace brewed coffee. Ethan sat quietly holding Lily's photo. Every time he looked at her smile, his heart ached, but this time with hope, not despair. When dawn broke, Ava set down her pen, exhausted but resolute. "It's done," she said, turning to them with steady eyes. "Tomorrow, we fight for this family." The next morning, the courtroom felt cold, the air thick with tension. Ethan sat beside Ava, his hands clasped tightly. Grace sat behind him, her eyes never leaving his back. Mrs. Lopez was there too, holding her small purse. Inside, the USB that carried the truth. Across the aisle, Vanessa Hall entered, confident, flawless in her designer dress, her expression calm and poised. She looked at Ethan and smiled faintly. That same smile he once loved, now hollow and cruel. The judge struck the gavel. "Court is in session. Case number 324, custody of minor, Lily Carter." Vanessa's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client only seeks to make amends. She's changed. She can offer stability, love, and a home worthy of her child." Vanessa lowered her head, dabbing at fake tears. "I just want my daughter to be happy, Your Honor." Ethan sat rigid, jaw clenched. Ava leaned close, whispering, "Breathe. Our turn's coming." When it did, Ava stood, voice firm and clear. "Your Honor, today we will see the difference between love and greed." She plugged in the USB. The screen lit up, casting pale light across Vanessa's face. The first clip played. Lily crying in a dark room, Vanessa shouting, "Be quiet! You ruined my makeup again!" Then another. Vanessa on the phone, laughing. $3 million. Once the papers are signed, I get the money. The kid? Who cares? The courtroom fell silent. You could hear the hum of the lights above. Vanessa shot to her feet. "That's fake. She doctored that." Ava met her eyes. "You're sure about that?" "Of course." "Then perhaps the woman who filmed it can clarify. Mrs. Lopez, please take the stand." Mrs. Lopez rose slowly, voice trembling but resolute. "I recorded those videos. I've worked for Mrs. Hall for 10 years. I saw her lock the child in her room. I heard her talk about the inheritance. Every word you just heard is true." Vanessa pointed, shrieking, "Liar!" The judge slammed the gavel. "Order! Mrs. Hall, one more outburst and you will be removed." Silence returned. Ava nodded toward the screen, her voice calm. "That's all, Your Honor. The truth speaks for itself." The side door opened. A small figure stepped in. Lily, wearing a pale blue dress, her hands clutching a stuffed toy. When she saw Ethan, her eyes lit up. "Daddy!" she cried, running straight to him. He dropped to his knees, tears spilling as he held her close. The judge softened. "Hello, Lily. Can you tell us who you'd like to live with?" Lily looked around the room, then turned toward Grace. "I want to stay with Daddy and Mommy Grace," she said quietly but firmly, "because they love me for real." For a moment, no one moved. The room filled with sniffles, quiet tears, the sound of truth landing where lies had stood. The judge cleared his throat, voice steady. "After reviewing the evidence, testimonies, and the wishes of the child, this court rules permanent custody awarded to Mr. Ethan Carter. Ms. Grace Miller is hereby recognized as the child's primary caregiver and authorized representative alongside Mr. Carter. Mrs. Vanessa Hall is prohibited from contact with the minor. An investigation into financial fraud and bribery is to be opened immediately." The gavel struck 1, 2, 3 times. The sound echoed like thunder. Vanessa sank back in her seat, face drained of color. Ava exhaled, shoulders trembling with relief. Ethan turned, gathering Lily into his arms. Grace stepped forward, eyes shining. He looked up at her and whispered, "We did it, Grace." The courtroom fell silent again, bathed in morning light streaming through high windows, a golden beam that caught the three of them in its glow. In that light, there was no more pain, no fear, only love and justice, and the quiet, certain peace of finally being home. After that day in court, life slowly began to heal, though not without its scars. The first few nights were the hardest. Lily often woke crying, trembling, calling for her father in the dark. Ethan and Grace took turns staying by her side, wrapping her in their arms until her breathing calmed. Sometimes Grace would sing softly, old lullabies from her childhood, while Ethan sat against the wall, watching them with quiet gratitude, knowing that this woman had somehow mended the pieces of their broken world. Time passed. The nightmares came less often. Lily laughed more, hummed as she drew, and every morning she hugged her father before running to find Mommy Grace to show her new drawings. One day she taped a picture to her wall, 3 smiling figures under a crooked sun, the words, "The Carter Family," written in bright colors. Ethan stood staring at it, his throat tight. Grace smiled gently, brushing away tears. Ethan soon found steady work at a small logistics company. He worked hard, earned respect, and came home each evening to the same site. Grace cooking dinner, Lily coloring at the table. The moment Lily shouted, "Daddy's home!" every worry disappeared. Months later, they moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. It wasn't fancy, but it had sunlight on the balcony, birds in the morning, and peace in every corner. "Daddy, this is our real castle," Lily cried, running through the empty rooms. Ethan laughed, lifting her up. Grace watched them, her heart so full it almost hurt. Quietly, Ethan began saving every dollar he could. He didn't tell Grace, counting the bills each night in a little tin box. And then, one golden afternoon, during a picnic by the lake, he finally pulled the box from his jacket. Grace was laughing as Lily chased butterflies nearby. Ethan took her hand, his voice trembling. "Grace, I thought my life was over. But then you came, you gave us light, you gave us a home, and you made me believe I was still worth loving." He opened the box. Inside was a small silver ring. "I don't have much, but I want to ask you, will you walk through the rest of life with me?" Grace covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. "Ethan, yes. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger. It caught the sunlight like a promise that would never fade. Lily ran over, squealing, "So Mommy Grace will be my real mommy now?" Ethan laughed, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart, your real mommy." Lily jumped up and down, hugging them both. "We're a real family now." Weeks later, they held a small wedding in the garden behind the bakery. No grand decorations, no crowd, just fairy lights, the smell of fresh bread, and laughter. Grace wore a simple white dress, Ethan a crisp white shirt. and Lily, the little flower girl, tossed petals in the air as they said their vows. Ethan's voice shook as he looked at Grace. "I promise to love and protect you both. Always." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold, the three of them stood together, arms around each other, surrounded by friends' applause and the soft scent of sugar and warmth. They didn't have much, not money, not luxury, but they had everything that truly mattered: love, a home, and each other.